What you could do is go ahead where it says title, you could type your name. Okay, I'll put my name, right? And what the title is whenever you go and look at a page, it's literally like the title bar, like this is, but on a web browser. Okay, and so these are the basic pieces of the page. You've got the doc type, and it declares what kind of document model that the browser is supposed to be rendering, like how it's supposed to read the code. And then you've got your HTML declaration that closes all the way down at the end. And then inside of that, you've got the head of the page, which if you remember from the lecture, the head is where kind of a lot of the unseen things go. Like this is the only thing that's kind of visually obvious up in the title bar, but everything else is sort of like instructions or, you know, things that it has to follow to know what to do with the rest of the page. And then down here, after the head ends, you've got the body. Everything in the body is what you're going to see in the viewport. So let's take a look at a couple of things right now. If we were to just type hello world like this, okay, unformatted text, one of the things that we could do, saved or unsaved, is we can go over here to live preview and it'll automatically bring up something that's live for us. I'm going to close this guy's thing, all right, and it'll open this page up. And then if I want, I can make this sort of side by side like this, and I could type some other stuff. My name is Lee. And what's really cool is that it will automatically show you the update over here, even though I haven't saved it. Okay, we talked about that in the demonstration to get you set up in brackets, but that's a refresher. All right, so now the next thing we could do is we can go ahead and let's just get rid of this hello world, my name is Lee stuff. And let's look at our example RTF file. Well, that's a mess if we look at it in there. We don't need to look at it that way. Let's do it this way. Let's go here and we're going to go into our assignment folder and let's just open it all up in like a normal text editor or something. I'm going to do a select all, copy, and I'm just going to minimize that. We'll jump back over here and I'm going to paste it. All right, well, in the body area, like in the code view, it looks sort of okay, but look what it does over here in the live view. It just runs everything together. And if you remember back to what we discussed before, this is all unformatted text because it doesn't have any kind of tags around it to give it semantic instructions so that the browser knows how to handle it, right, to visually deal with it, right? This is just all these new line returns and things like that. Those are just other kinds of formatting that don't get read in the HTML. You'll notice that like all this space disappears, right? Okay, so that's something that's important to understand. Now, there are some ways that we could approach this. We could go wrap tags around all this stuff, but let's not deal with it that way. Let's take a different approach. I'm just going to do an undo on that so that it goes away. Instead, let's pull up that document that we were referring to earlier. Okay, so I went and I pulled up my document, all right, that we were referring to earlier. And this is, you know, as if you had drawn some, you know, colored pencils or markers or something around different sections. And if you remember, what we had decided is that we have some major sections. We have this top section, we have this content section, and we have this footer, okay? Well, you're not going to know some of these tag names, so I'm just going to help you out. So let's start by looking at these in sections. So this first top part would be section. And now, as soon as I hit that close bracket, the way that we type the syntax is we have an open bracket, okay, and then we type the word, in this case it's called section, for the tag, and then we close the bracket. And then what it does is it auto completes for us, which is wonderful, and it puts the cursor right in between. That way we don't forget to write this close tag. Almost all HTML tags are going to have an opening tag, which is this first part, and then a close tag, which is this closed part right here. And the way that you know it's a closing part is that it has the opening bracket, but then it has a / before the word. Okay, so that's how you know it's a closed tag. There are some tags that are referred to as self-closing, and we'll get to that later. All right, but what brackets will do for you, based on the settings that we set up, is it will automatically auto-complete it, and it'll leave the cursor right in between so that you can start typing in between. So this is kind of great. So like what we could do here, for instance, is we could, let me just start typing this all over again so you can see that again. So we'll say section, And then as soon as I hit that last bracket, it auto completes, puts the cursor in the center. All right, so what I can do now is if I hit the return key, what's really nice is it automatically wants to nest it for me. So if I wanted to use the number 1, for instance, to say this is the first section, I could type a 1. And now I want to show you something. If I just hit the normal return key right here, it does that. Well, that's kind of annoying. That's not the way I want it to indent. The way I want it to indent is so that the last closing section goes all the way back to the beginning of that line. Okay, so if I do a shift return, see, that's how it looks. And so that way you can see anything that is nested inside of that section tag is going to be enclosed in it and indented visually. Now, the space that it uses to indent, you're not going to be able to actually see that. In fact, if we jump back over here real quickly, you'll see that there's no indentation at all. It just ignores that white space, okay? So I could either just take this and I could copy it and I could come down to the next line, but look what it's doing. It's trying to put this right here. So if I do shift return, it'll return me back to the previous tab at the beginning of the line, right? And so I could paste that and I could just change this to number 2, or I could have just retyped it. That's another option. Okay, so if I just do shift return, it'll put me in the right place, and then I can do my footer tag, this, and it's going to be the same thing where I can say footer and then shift return, and it returns it back there for me. Okay, and then you can see over here what it's doing. Unlike before, remember where it just ran everything together? Because I actually have properly formatted tags now, it understands that section tags and footer tags are block level elements. What does that mean? To be a block level element, it means that you can see that it's taking up literally the entire block. See how this blue highlight is showing me my current tag, it's showing me the current thing that is selected, right? Well, it's highlighting the entire block because it's a block level element. It literally takes up 100% width, or as much as is possibly designated. So that's the way that works. Okay. Now the next thing that we can do is that this is sort of sloppy looking. It's kind of hard to see what's going on really. So if I wanted to come down here, I can go ahead and make a comment. I want to make some comments so I can see what parts of the page we're actually looking at. In this first section, if you wanted to just jump back over here and look at this, this is going to be basically like a banner. So we can call this, there's some different ways you could do this. You can call this like this. We'll say banner section. In fact, what we'll do is we'll say begin or start or something like that. And then if you want, you can highlight this, and there's some different ways you can do it. You can either go up to edit, and then you can say toggle line comment, right? And then automatically will wrap these comments around it. Or you could have also, I'll undo that, you could have also looked at what the shortcut is here. So on a Mac it's command / on PC that would be a control key probably. So if you just take a look at it and see what it's supposed to be. So if I were to do a shortcut key command, then I could do command / and it would automatically put comment marks around it. And what a comment mark is going to do is basically make it so that you, the coder, can read it, but the browser will just skip right over it. And then that way you don't have any problems with it being read into the regular HTML. And so if you wanted to look at it here, you could see that if we didn't have that comment on there, I'll toggle it back off again, right? It shows up. If I put it there, it's right there. The other thing that's kind of nice too is I could, you know, inside of it I can put all sorts of like characters and things like that to make it easier for me to see it, like on a wide page, for instance. Okay, so I could do that if I wanted to. All right, so anyway, I can do that. I'll copy this, and I'm going to go ahead down here and I'll say, do a paste, and I'll say begin. This will be content. And then down here, we'll say begin footer. Okay, and the other thing too that might be nice also to do is that you could copy these things, right? And then you could come down here. You can just change this to end so that you can also see where these things end as well. Okay, and let's do the same thing. We'll just copy this. I'll change this word to end. Okay, so now you've got some comments that are somewhat useful for you. Okay, so now instead of having just this 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2 footer thing in there, it's not very helpful. Let's actually put the real thing in there. But before we start typing, one of the things that I would like to say, is that it's really easy to make, especially when you're first starting, it's easy to make, mistyping errors and things like that. So one of the things I'd like for you to go ahead and do is go up here to edit, and I want you to find this thing that says show code hints. Okay, go ahead and turn that on. And then you'll see whenever we start typing some other codes, that it'll pop up with some suggestions for you. So especially for beginners, that's really helpful. Let's jump back over to our document and see what we've got going here. All right, so we'll go to the next thing, and you'll see that all these things in pink, those are articles. Now, what is an article, and why should I be wrapping, yet another box of stuff in there, right? Well, an article, if you want to think about it, something that is contained. Like you could take an article out of a newspaper or take an article out of a journal or magazine or something, and because it is self-contained with specific information of like header, headings, paragraphs, things like that, it can stand on its own in a different context, right? And so that's the way that the article tag is sort of looked at. It's something that's technically sort of syndicatable. Like you could yank it out of an original context and put it into a new context, like if you were to syndicate an article, and it would stand on its own. All right, so that's why we have these things as articles. So the top section, the banner, has its own article. All right, and I want to show you, instead of 1, we're going to start typing, and then the minute I put that open bracket, you see it automatically starts at the top level of the alphabet, which is A for anchor. Well, as soon as I start typing AR, you see that it narrows it down to other things. And if I didn't want to keep typing, I could arrow this down and just hit the enter key, and it completes it for me. Now, it doesn't completely finish writing the tags, because later you'll see that we might want to add a class or something. We might need to add an attribute inside of this tag, but right now we're just going to leave it alone, and as soon as I hit that close bracket, it completes it for me, right? So that's really handy. Okay, now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do the same thing, article, right? And then if I type far enough, I can just hit enter and I don't have to fool with it, right? Okay, so now we have 3 articles in our main content section. So we've got 1, 2, 3, we've got 1, 2, 3. And then if we look down at the next, you'll see that each article is in green. If you remember what we talked about before, each article is going to have a header that's going to contain its main heading. And that is just the way that it's supposed to be with general syntax. So I could go ahead here and I could type, header, and then inside of that, we're going to have, if you were to look even further down, there's going to be a heading level in there, like an H1 for a heading. All right, and then down here, if you looked even further, we would have in this lighter yellow, each one of these things is an H2, because we're only supposed to, well, it's ideal to only have one H1 inside of a document, because that is sort of like the granddaddy of the page, telling everybody what the page is mostly about, right? So I could right here just go ahead and say H1, and then inside of that I could say, H1 here, or something like that, right? And the other thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and format this so that it's really easy. If I put my cursor right before header, and then right before H1, and then I can go after the ending tag of my H1, you see it starts to format it in a way that it looks nicely nested. And then the syntax is really easy to see what's happening. Now, I could type all of that stuff individually down here for each of these articles, or I could just copy this up here. Just want the article. Command C, and then I'm gonna just paste on top of all of these. And then instead of H1s, this is actually, if you remember, these light yellow things are H2s. So I'm going to change the tag information and the content inside of the tag to H2. And so now I've got one article that's well formatted. I can copy it, and I'll just come down a couple of lines like that. And then now I've got a really nice little structure here going. It's clean, it has a good document outline, and it mimics directly what's happening over here. So move on to the next video and we'll just keep going.